Now,
Okay.
When you see, you'll be on and you'll see live up there on your left-hand corner. We're on.
Uh-huh.
now,
Okay. Mm.
Good morning. This is Dr. Obutashaka. This is the Dr. Obutashaka Show. We're privileged again to have my sister, Sandrea, a master astrologer and a healing lady in many ways, on today. The topic for today is ways to know your inner astrological universe. We'll be exploring introductory features to astrology that will be useful for you to have an understanding of your inner universe. Before going into that, I want to remind people that we're going to be doing a webinar. People have been signing up for it, 6-fold stages to mental freedom. And to sign up, what you should do is go to otshaka@sbcglobal.net, or you can take your response to the show that comes in after the chat and put in there your interest for enrolling in this with your email address so we can contact you. So that's going to be important. And I want to really say that there have been some really good responses to the last show. One of the biggest responses was a number of people said, "We want Sandrea back. You have her back?" Well, actually, you're getting her back today, and there'll be a final introductory one. We'll be doing this over a period of time, but a final introductory one the following Saturday. So you're actually getting her 3 times. And so that should at least whet your appetites. And then Sandrea will give you information. If you're interested in having your own chart read, she can give you information on how to contact her. And you can also see that there's a website listed for her that's listed on the chat. So you can check that out. A few people made that request the last time. So that's by way of introduction. So today, Sandrea is going to lead off this discussion with an introduction to astrology and some of the important things that it's important for you to know to get you to understand how it works inside of you. So she's going to give you some introductory points. And I really want to stress, this is not a course on astrology. And, we're not trying to give you all the stuff on it. We're just trying to give you an idea of what it means to say as above, so below. And so how does that transfer inside of you? And in the last show, we were showing how we're stellar matter and we are made up of everything that makes up the stars. So it makes sense to realize that the stars are in you. And so she's going to be giving you some ideas on and approaches she's used as a master astrologer for understanding that. So you begin to get a better idea of how it works inside of you. So I really enjoyed this. When you, I don't drink wine, but wine mellows and everything, I understand, and it gets better with age. I don't know because I don't drink wine. But what I do know is when you see a person develop and grow and blossom, that's a privilege. And when it's somebody in your own family, your own sister, that's a real big privilege. You know what I mean? So when she's telling me she's going to do this and that, and what do I think? I ain't got no thoughts because you're the master on this. I know it's good because you know your stuff. So that's the real joy to see this flowering. And I know my parents who are in heaven, they get a lot of pride out of that as well, and my brother and grandparents and everything else. So Sandrea, it's all yours.
Thank you, Shaka. So let me just center myself. So many people, well, some people had questions about my take on divinity. So I wanted to start with that. First of all of us, every single one of us are divine. We are both human, we are divine, and some of us are born into this life with a real desire to remember, to know who it is we are. And those of us that come with that desire, astrology is a major key for assisting us. Now, it's interesting. My Mercury is in Pisces and it's really being aspected at the moment. So just give me a moment till I can start getting on the roll. And so let me just say it like this. Each one of us is divine. I don't care what atrocious thing we've ever done. It doesn't cancel out the fact that we are both human and divine. The big question is, are we living it? Are we living our divinity? Now, I know back in the beginning of my walk, I had a talk with God. I wanted to understand what it was that I could do to feel a closer contact, to really experience the fact that God is alive and well in my universe, inside me, not out in the sky somewhere, but really inside me. So I started having my conversations with God. And what I have discovered is that, first of all, I'm a spiritual person. I belong to no religious association. However, I have gained knowledge out of all of them, whether it's a Christian, the Shinto, just very, very many kinds of spiritual practices that I have delved deeply into. And one of the things that I found to be true in myself is when they say, first of all, Cinnabar, I should be on one screen. Where are you? So anyway, I lost where I was at there. Okay. Not sure exactly where I left off at that point. You just, hmm. Well, let's go to the next step since that's not coming in at the moment. So what I have, oh, that's what came in. Aha, it came back. Is what I found to be true is seek ye first the kingdom. Now, in my own life, when I started that and really wanted to seek first the kingdom, what I discovered in myself was, well, what I really wanted was a good boyfriend. What I really wanted was that I really wasn't seeking the kingdom. And then I had to ask God, I'm insane. I know that if I seek first the kingdom, all else will be given to me. And yet here I am seeking for this and that and all these material things. So I began asking God to show me how to help me, to lift me out of this insanity and to assist me to really make that choice. And so that is the first step for all of us. in anything that we want to start in astrology, astrology shows us first steps that we can take. So if you're at the place in your life where that's what you're really wanting, you really want to connect with your divinity, live your divinity as much as possible, stay connected, not separated, then your first step, in my studies of alchemy, we learn that the first step is not really one. The first step is zero. It's to empty. The first step is always to let everything go down to the soles of our feet. If I don't let go of my biases, my opinions, my whole take on things, how can I go beyond myself? How can I get a better take? How can I get God's take? How can I get the highest take? I have to let go. So for me, the letting go phase in astrology is taking a backward step on the wheel. The wheel starts with the first sign of Aries, and the last sign is Pisces. So we start with zero by going backward into that Piscean side of ourselves. And all of us have all of the signs inside of ourselves. All of us have all the planets. Where do you think we get our powers from? Our power to communicate, it is ruled by Mercury. Our power for initiating and starting new projects, that's the beginning of Aries. That's Mars. So the first step, as I say, you go to zero. And in the sacred tarot, it tells the truth about ourselves through the 22 major keys. And the key that's aligned with the 12th house, with Pisces, with Neptune, is key 12, which is a hangman. It's a person who's purposely hanging by one foot off of this tree of life, and he's letting go of everything. And as he lets go of everything, his head fills with light, the light of God. So that's the first step. So then the next step is we have to take some kind of action. We say we really want to connect with our divinity, and it's in there somewhere, but it's usually what I was shown. I was shown a vision that most of us have. It's like it's in a cave. It's kind of buried deep because we get into this world and all of a sudden the drama of life takes us over and we start wanting all these things of the world. But even when I was a little girl, I could see that that was a silly thing to do. Why were people focusing on things they could not take beyond the grave? They could not take when they leave this world. So anyway, we get back to our desire, our intention, initiate, really want, and we need to be gut level honest with ourselves. When we say we really want to know God within ourselves, to really connect with us, we need to examine ourselves. Do we really mean that? If there's a real flirting boy, I just want to get famous. I want to make $1 million. If that's really in front of everything, even though you really want, you do have a desire to know your spiritual self, to know yourself as a divine being with receiving the inheritance from your Father, which is your God living inside you, not in some space out there beyond. When you really, really want that, you will start seeing signs in your life. And if you don't want it again, all you need to do is ask, because that's the other thing I found to be so true. Ask and you shall receive. So ask if you find yourself really embroiled in the world and yet there's a deeper yearning that you really want to connect with who you are, then your next step is a very Aries. It's a fiery. It has the initiation kind of quality to it. There's a desire that starts burning in you, and that's what you want above all else. Your life starts changing from that point. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to, to be some spiritual ideal of what it's like to be spiritual. We get to just be who we are. So once we make that intention and we set that intention, that's that second step of Aries. I'm only going to give you 4 steps all total, so we're not going around the chart. So once we get clear that that's what we really want, we really want to seek that kingdom, seek our divinity, and then find out for ourselves, is it true that all else is given us? So the next step is Taurus. It's it is ruled by the planet Venus, which is the goddess of love. So in order for us to really receive and own and receive the divinity that we are, we need to be in a space that we can receive it. When I started off, I kept blocking myself because I said, I'm not ready yet. I had all these ideas and desires and things of being so perfect. I had a picture of how I should look. And I wasn't going to give God to me until I got holy enough in my eyes. And luckily I saw that and I asked for help. And I asked God to show me how to love me the way God loved me. When that idea came to me, that had to have come from beyond myself. That did not come from my pea brain. It came from me earnestly, really wanting to connect with my divinity. And when that popped in, my whole life started shifting and changing and going in a whole different direction. So your next step is to prepare yourself to receive. And the way you prepare yourself is your willingness to love yourself exactly as you find yourself. With all your foibles, with your idiosyncrasies, with the middle finger that might pop up every now and then, it's about loving ourselves as we are. And one of the teachings that was made in the Christian religion is to love thy enemy. Well, when I first heard that, I thought I had to learn to love the other guy. And yeah, that's part of it, but it was about me willing to love all the idiosyncrasies, my weaknesses, my rage, my whatever it is, all of my different shadows. That was key for me for my whole life turning around. And it's key for you, it's key for anyone who really wants to connect with their divinity. And then the last sign that we really need to work with is, and that's the sign of Earth. That's growing. It's growing in the garden. It's really owning yourself, really just, and we're told that all we need is that little willingness, like a mustard seed. You don't have to be anybody special because you already are. That's the truth of who each and every one of us is. We're special. We're unique. We're one of a kind in the whole galaxy. So the next step is in the step of Gemini, whose ruler is Mercury, who is called in the Tarot the magician. And why is that? Because when we start using our minds wholly and according to spiritual law as shown through astrology, when we start doing that, we find out just how magical words are. We find out that we have been lied to on a huge scale, that life does not work the way we are, where it has been indoctrinated and shoved, just imprinted on us. Life does not work like that. Life is far more mental than we have any idea of. The whole universe is intelligent. It's alive, it's awake. All these planets, there is intelligence, there's a life force, there's a living force, there's a love force coming out of all the planets that you see in the heavens overhead. And they're the same planets that are deep inside us. all of us are connected with all that there is. It's us coming out and trying to separate ourselves off and trying to figure things out and figure out how to guide our life. Well, that's ego in control. That's personality in control. When you want to connect with your divinity, now you're saying you want to connect with your soul. Well, if you want to connect with your soul, then you allow your soul to control your life. And as that happens, you are lifted, literally our ascension, our enlightenment, our realization of who we are. That's a gift. It is given to us. Our job is to make a space to receive this gift. So when we get to the sign of Gemini, and Alice Bailey, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her. She was a major teacher in the Theosophical side of spirituality. And she has this book on esoteric astrology, because using astrology as a fortune teller is it's very similar in some ways to prostitution when you think of the wisdom on all levels of our life that is embraced inside astrology. So, which is why, okay, let me not go off on that zone. Let me stay with the Gemini. So, once we get to the point where we have desired, we had used our Mars and our Aries, our fire, to desire to remember who we are, then we use our Earth, which is the Taurus, to really value ourselves as we are, as we find ourselves, knowing that we're constantly going to be growing and changing. We're not stuck in any place unless we stick ourselves there. And then to maintain, once you start, how would you call it, embodying your own divinity, now the maintenance is, what are the things you're allowing yourself to talk about, to think about, to focus on? Because whatever you're focusing on is growing in the garden of your life. And so it's really important that that we be aware of some of the thoughts that are going through our mind, and to just give it absolutely no power. We give it power if we start exchanging with it, trying to fix it, trying to stop it. No, just give it no power. You need to find your own affirmation, whatever that affirmation is for you. The one I love to use comes from A Course in Miracles, which is, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. And by living that axiom, I have come up against some incredible experiences in my life. And when I remember that there's nothing my holiness cannot do, now I'm open for the solution to come, for the soul-lution to come. So that's my overview of how I work with the planets that are above us, that are inside of us. And these are initial steps that if you use these initial steps, starting with the Pisces of the letting go and your desire and making space to receive it, and to watch what your thoughts are and what your conversations are, you can use that to initiate anything that you're wanting to grow in the garden of your life. Those are the first alchemical steps. And they are using the elements of which we are composed of: the fire, the earth, and the air, which is Gemini, is an air sign, and the water, which is the Pisces. So, Shalka, is there anything you would like to comment or say about what I have said so far?
Yeah, profound. Because what you're saying is some very practical things that people can do to get into their God within, their divinity within. And So letting go, I thought that was very important because um, very often in life we have preconceived ideas, and this will often get in the way of living, you know, preconceived idea about people, preconceived idea about a situation. And then we're not really living the situation. And so this idea, I think, really leads to openness. So I think that that's a real profound thing. And as you've told me, that's what you do when you get into readings,
Absolutely.
that is a very key part. Um, and then you made the point about taking action to connect with your divinity. That's real key because that's the personal work that we do, which it's kind of like an athlete. Um, you know, there's personal work that you do in your work as an athlete. Well, that's because the person's essence is athleticism. So in your case, what you're saying is people need to find what it is that drives them, and that is the path to their personal divinity. And I think one of the most important things that you said was that don't let the society's ambitions about what you should do get in the way of your drives and desire. And you used money as an example. It doesn't mean that if somebody's a businessman or woman, that then that's going to be one of the outcomes. But then their drive is more than money. It's about business and how can you help people with business. But if the dollar bill, dead presidents are getting in the way of your ambition, I know that's the road to misery. I haven't taken it, but I know plenty of people who have. So I think that, and you know, my sister's a Pisces, so this is a natural inclination for her to deal with the spirit realm. But for a lot of us, some of us may be more earthbound. And so we may think that's our natural inclination. The natural inclination, though, is whatever your calling is to use it to help other people. And so, you know, I think what you said is right on. And I thought you had an example of someone that you had worked with that you wanted to share.
Yes, I am going to do that now to give an example of how I work. And so first of all, I thought I'm going to give you an example of how I utilized astrology, how some of the ways that I utilize astrology, because each person is totally different. I am an astrologer, yes. I am also a priestess, an alchemist, and a shamanist. And so I use whatever is needed in the moment with my clients. So I want to say that for me, it's an astrology reading for me. I like to work with people with their questions, with where they're at right now. And in order to do that, I go really deep into the study. I spend a lot of time. Sometimes it's several hours before we even get on the phone to be able to really get a good sense of the nature. And I open up, you know, and allow spirit to guide me. I might be guided to a book or to watch a certain movie or something, because there might be something that is really important to this person that I don't know about yet, that I need to have some kind of a sense about so that spirit can come in and use that and direct me. And so by the time we actually get to the actual consultation, the first thing I do when I'm working with a client is we both join and we go into that space of deep let go. And I let go of everything that I have studied, everything that I know about astrology, everything is just gone. I'm in an empty space and I have to wait until this flow starts. You saw how it took me a moment to get into the flow of this at the beginning of this show. So that's how I work best, because my Mercury is in a water sign, Pisces. It's in a flow sign. I have to wait for the direction. And so then I asked God to show me what needs to be said. And from then on, I am guided. So there was this client that that came to me. And usually, I will say that many of my clients come during times of crisis. And this woman was in deep crisis. This woman was madly in love with this guy and had been with him for over a year. And they had set their date, their wedding date. And close to the wedding date, there was an argument. And then what ended up happening, he married another woman on my clients and then planned wedding day. So you can imagine this woman is devastated. So I held space for her, encouraged her. She needed to grieve and worked with her on that level. Now, meanwhile, so when she got to a point where she was open to receive some kind of information, I was able to feedback with her that the universe was not out to get her, that literally this was a gift in disguise. And in her case, Uranus was conjunct Venus in her 7th house. What does that mean? I'm going to tell you. For her, that Uranus is a disruptive agent, but it's disruptive for a purpose. I know Uranus well. Uranus rules my chart. So I have learned that when devastation and heavy things hit me, the first thing I'm going to ask for is show me where the gift is in this. Because Uranus shows up and appears to take things out of our life, not to hurt us or disrupt us, but it's the Uranus, from what my experience of Uranus, it wants the fastest way to bring us up into divine mind, into highest mind. And it doesn't care about the pain or the disruption that it causes. And in the case of Uranus, it rules things like earthquakes and tornadoes, and people's lives can be changed in an instant. And if they're worried about and thinking about the woe is me, guess what? During that time when you're going through such fear or distraught, and in her case, grief, then that energy is really powerful. And if she had gone into pity-pot, which would be understandable, but how could that help her if she went into victimhood and pity-pot over that? So I was there and I worked with her on a daily basis for a moment to just really help her to stay focused on love. Yes, love. Even him, even the quote unquote perpetrator. Why? Because if you're not loving, it's impossible to be connected with your divinity. Love and truth are essential. Love, and for me, love, truth, and beauty are essential to stay connected with the highest, our divine. And then in her case, because it was Uranus conjunct Venus, I said, look, you need to grieve, and you need to grieve thoroughly, but you need to grieve thoroughly fast and keep your mind forever on, I don't know what the gift is, but there's a gift in this, and keep your mind focused on gleaning that gift, because it looks like the person, the man of your dreams is coming in. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, she had grieved enough that she's going out, and with love in her heart, she didn't throw any kind of, I'll never do this, and I'm going to close down for that and protect myself and throwing all that crap into her future. She didn't do any of that. She really did work on keeping her love going and on grieving, being real and being true to herself. So she goes out shopping to get a gift. It wasn't even her son's birthday, but it was a special gift she wanted to give her son, and met the love of her life that day. How the story would have ended up if she had focused on the ain't it awfuls but what you focus on grows. She would have started growing more ain't it awfuls in her life. So I just wanted to introduce that sometimes in the hardest times of our life, not sometimes, for me, it's always at the hardest times of my life, that's an initiation point. I'm either going to pass my test or I'm not. And if I meet it with love in my heart and the willingness to let go of my biases and my preconceived judgments and ask God and really want to know truth. When I do that, I come out just smelling like a rose. And I have written a book about all these stories. I mean, impossible situations that turn around in an instant just by using that axiom of show me where the gift is in this, and living in a place of love and gratitude for even the things that we don't understand, staying with love and gratitude. So I want to just end this talk with, let you know everything is within. All the planets are within you. All the signs are within you. And they all have their divine aspects. It's up to us. That's why I originally called my website influenceyourstars.com. People always want to know, what are the stars going to do for me? Well, what are you doing? What are you doing inside yourself to reduce, to bring forth the highest? Because these are your powers. How are you going to bring forth the highest in yourself? And maybe that's the end of what I have to say. Let me just check and see if there is something I wanted to say that I let go by. Yeah, everything is so fast. We all need times to just pause. Several times during the day, many times actually during the day, to just go and let everything go and be in that space, in that receptive mode to receive the divine wisdom that's churning around at this moment in time, and to receive the divine love that's pouring in. Divine love is pouring in to all of us all the time. Are we there to greet it? Are we there to open to it? Or are we so deep into, wanting to have this and either our desire nature, or so deep in our longings or whatever it is that we miss it? So I just want to encourage you to seek ye first. If you are willing to do that, you doesn't mean you can't have, like Shaka said, a good business and have the money and have the fame and all like that too. If you're seeking your divinity first, and I believe that's the reason why most of us, I would say, came on this planet originally, but then we get here in the glamour of this place and we want the candy. It looks like it's going to make us happy, but does it? The only thing that makes me happy is my inner peace of mind that comes from me doing the work, willing to stay open and loving, and willing to go beyond myself to ask for truth and let go of trying to figure things out in my own way. That's how I get in my way. So I think that's what I had to say.
Right on. As we would say, right on to the right on. And your example of the lady that you helped and the power of thought, and what Sandra is saying, as you think, so you are, that had she thought, woe is me, this guy's done me in, all men are going to do me in, then chances are she'd be alone right now in misery, because what you think is what you get in the end. And I'm not blaming people for their oppression. So do
Right.
not read this as saying, because the police came up on you today, you thought about getting hit upside the head. No, we're not talking that.
No.
We live in a reality of oppression that we have to fight. We're talking about this inner power that we have that is one of the greatest powers we bring to this fight, and that is the power of your destiny. And so she's talking about, she could see, Sandrea could see, something else was coming into her life. And I, as an astrologer, I got the point, Uranus in that house, that's change. So this is a woman who had actually contracted for change in that dimension. And as it turns out, that was probably good, because as it turns out, it may well have been that that argument that ended that relationship could have been postponed until the marriage. Same
Ooh.
thing would have happened, you know? So what looked like a bad situation actually was a setup for something else. And we often don't know what that is.
Mhm.
But if you're tuned to what's inside of you, then guess what? You can make lemonade out of lemons. That's my philosophy in almost anything. I'm looking at, okay, now what can I get out of this? You know what I mean? As well as learning from the negative. So I get it. Anything else you want to say, Sandra?
Yeah, that's a good comment. And yeah, it was really great because if he had the capacity to do that to his new wife too, to spite her, better she find out then than later. And
Yeah,
not only that, but that he wasn't the one.
exactly.
It looked like it to her. And the truth is, there is so much mystery, and we really need to cultivate a trust in the universe. And as we make intentions for ourselves to live in our divinity, then we get to we're living, we're testing it, we're walking with it, and we discover that the universe has got our back. The universe is nothing but love. And it's going to mirror us, though. If we're into all this resentment and upset and hatred, well, it's going to mirror that for us. We will grow that in our life, but there's no need to.
Uh-huh.
No
Yeah,
need.
very, very important.
We can
And
live in the magic.
and so Andrea's point about how do we influence our stars? See, she's giving you the correct interpretation, because too many people misread that as the stars being in control. The
Yes.
stars definitely are aligned in a certain way, but you are the ultimate control agency, positively or negatively. It's your choice. I had a friend, she passed a few years ago. She was 90 years old, a beautiful lady. She would tell God what to do. She was always, and for the
Oh
powerful
yeah.
spiritual person, but she'd be giving God direction.
That's right.
And of course, she did that throughout her life with everybody else. Sister McKenya, who has passed on to the other side. Beautiful
We're
spirit.
in dialogue, Cinnabar. We need to both be there. We're in dialogue now. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, so that point of you have power over your stars, the stars influence you, the universe influences you, you influence the universe. It's a mutual thing. But the key thing is to know the universe within. So what I want to do is to get into my little part of this, and then,
Well, one more thing I just wanted to
yeah,
say
go ahead.
is that I didn't say at the beginning, this is a free choice universe.
Right.
That's why it's so important that we ask, that we utilize our ask and ye shall receive, because I know, I experienced the fact that there are all kinds of Orishas and special angelic beings all around us that are wanting to help, but they cannot unless we ask. So
Right.
just want to end with that.
Right. Yeah, we're a power unto ourselves, each person, and hopefully a power for good. So what I want to add to this discussion, because both of us are picking our way of introducing you to how to draw on the powers from within. And Sandrea, in addition to being an astrologer, is a spirit lady. And so she's going directly into divinity and how we understand the divinity within. And that is the real purpose, which is us. And so what I want to do is to use an example to show you how you draw from your own inner powers. And the example is John Coltrane, a master musician. You'll notice I have my jazz outfit on. One side is Miles Davis, and that's my name on the other side. And on the back is a painting of Miles Davis. An artist at the Jazz Festival about 28 years ago made this for me. So I figured I'd get into the spirit of the moment. And jazz is like the cream of the African-American art form. It is the highest peak. It's the classical music of the world and the classical music of this country, and it stands on the blues, the spiritual blues. And so John Coltrane was a innovative master of this great art form, but not only a great master, a wonderful human being. They called him sweetness. In his greatest trials in his life, John displayed goodness. We don't all do that. And I'm going to talk about some of the pits that he went through. And it was not good, but never did he lie. Never did he steal. Never did he do any harm to anybody, because his fundamental nature was fundamentally good. He represents the best of our culture and our peoplehood and the best of humanity, which all people have, and certain people rise to a very high level. But he went through trials. He went through tribulations. So I'm going to look at John Coltrane as a metaphor or as a model for us looking at ourselves. And I've been telling people for over about 25 years, I've been working on a book on mastery called Seba, and that refers to the light that dwells within each of us. And one of the 6 masters I'm looking at is John Coltrane. So I used his astrological chart, which I'm looking at here, which will mean nothing to most of you unless you're an astrologer, and I'm not going to go into what it means. But I look at it so I remind myself of certain qualities of Coltrane. But I use that in writing on his mastery, on his different levels of mastery, so I can see him through his eyes. But I only use what is confirmed by fact. In other words, I could make mistakes as an astrologer and misinterpret certain things. So I've done a lot of research. I've got huge folders on each phase of his life. And so I'm just taking a splice of it to look at him. So Sandrea and most astrologers are dealing with reading a person, oftentimes who in a state of crisis, they don't know. And in other times, it may be someone they know. And they take a lot of time. There may be times we have a lot of time to do a chart. And there may be times like when she's doing a fair, it's on the spot. And she's throwing everything away, getting into the vibes of the person, and then listening to the questions I have as she gave it with her example, and then giving her advice, which is not only astrological, she's drawn on the spirit. So for me, I've done readings I don't do anymore. I don't have time. But when I'm saying writing about a historical figure, I'm going to also look at their chart. I'm going to look at their history. I'm going to look at everything else, but I'm able to see them through their eyes. And that is crucial. And by the way, John Coltrane was into astrology. That was something he loved. He was into a lot of things. So I'm using him as an example for us to appreciate the universe that dwells within each of us. Now, one of the things about Coltrane, when I looked at his chart and then I looked at his life, his inner life was rough. It was not easy. It was not easy. And what I want to say about this inner life as an introduction is it was a reflection of choices he made before coming to this earth. Sandrea was saying that there's the whole point of how human beings influence the stars, and then how the stars influence us. And that basically this is the realm of free will. That's why humans come here. We've covered this before in God Within, and we talked about the different powers that human beings have. When we look at the astrological chart, last week I made the point that the astrological chart is your car. Those are the choices you made in heaven in the presence of God. And you made them to come to earth with certain challenges. So the big challenges of your life that you think is woe is me, you pick those because it's a part of your life path and your life journey. And I pointed out briefly before that in heaven, we usually have friends, spirit friends. And these spirit friends are also involved in our compact because they've agreed to come to earth with us to tackle certain things. Each one has different tasks based on your gifts. And so in heaven, there's also a preparation for coming to earth. This comes from gifted spiritual mediums. All African systems say this because we're the first people, we go back to origin. And so what they say is in heaven, there's actually training before you come to earth to, prep you up for certain skills that you're going to need. It will not help you to solve the problems you face here because this is free will. When you get here, it's a great mystery what's going to happen. You don't remember the compact you made, and a lot of the trials you face, you may not understand why. But the key is, and this is the key to what Sandrea was saying, is to be true to your wish, to be true to your heart, to be true to that thing that is the thing you desire most. And that generally lies in the realm of your gifts and the most precious gifts. And so the reason spirits come here are a lot of reasons, but the main one is to get closer to God. Because many of us, some of us don't, many of us know, a lot of us don't. We've been here before. And in fact, Christians believed this until the Council of Constantinople, where they eliminated from Christian teaching the idea of reincarnation. Before that, Christians believed in reincarnation. That was replaced with eternity. And what is that? You'll be in heaven or hell forever. That's it. And how did you get to heaven? God's grace. If God didn't have the grace to save you, you're too sinful to get there on your own. I haven't discussed this one before. I'm going to step on some toes, but I got to say this. You were not born in sin. You were born as spirits who are whole. And if you don't believe in reincarnation, you definitely know you couldn't be born in sin. And even if you were, you only get here because you have done some things on the heavenly realm that make you deserving of coming to this earthly realm. And so this idea of sin holds us a lot back because, yes, we do things wrong sometimes, and we call that sin. But this idea of the eternal thing of you're born with faults on you, that makes you think that you have no power over your life. And that makes no sense. You didn't do anything. So how could you be born in wrong or sin? So I know I'm stepping on a few toes, but you know me, revolutionary, your original revolutionary. I almost don't care. I do. I'm a sensitive person. But on this one, come on, let's be real, So in coming to earth, then, as Sandrea said, the real issue is free will. And so everything we say about astrology, the key thing to get straight is, yeah, it's important to know that, but it's your choices that matter. And it's what you choose to do with your life that is the ultimate thing. And Dr. Asa Hilliard, one of our great scholars, he was paraphrasing Shakespeare when he said, in life, the choice is to be or not to be yourself or not to be. That's the choice. And when you go outside yourself, it's no choice. And a lot of you are in that zone, working for what you call the man. You have to do that. I mean, you need a job. But if that's your sole goal, then that's misery. If you have to do that, you can't pursue it through your profession, your wish. You're doing it another way. Just pursue it. But the key thing is to go with your wish. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to address as an overriding thing with John Coltrane, and then get into his essence and showing how astrology ties into it. And there are two major things. One is all musicologists who have listened to Coltrane's playing when he was younger, when he was in the military, in his early phase, said this guy couldn't hardly play. That was what they said. And they are experts in this field, you know. And then I look at his chart, I can say, well, yeah, that may be the case, but the experts all say it, you know. He didn't have much in the way of musical gifts. He had two that were essential. Rhythm. That was his main musical gift, according to his music teacher, Miss Yoakley, in high school. Rhythm. And the other gift he had, and most people miss this, is the passion for his gift. That gift may not have been very great, but he had the passion. And let me tell you something, that passion was total. This man was a saxophone player. In high school, he was playing saxophone all the time except in class. At home, he had a saxophone around his neck when he was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He went to bed with the saxophone. I'm sure he took it off when he went to sleep. And he went shopping. He had a saxophone, and he wasn't that much interested in shopping. You understand? So his passion was in line with his gift. And so I would say that along with rhythm, his greatest gift was his passion for his gift. And that was his greatest strength. Of all the things that he had, it was his greatest strength, and it carried him through. And then all the other good things, the qualities he had as a human being that were exceptional, but it's common for a lot of Black people. We come from North Carolina. That's Upper South. Upper South isn't as bad as the cotton patch. So Blacks don't get as much heat. It's bad, but it's not as bad. And then he was raised up in a church environment, and his grandfather was a preacher. And Coltrane was not religious. He was spiritual, like Sandrea. But he would go to church and hear that preacher preach, his grandfather or others, and then go home on the saxophone and try and reproduce the voice through the saxophone. His medium, his main medium for music was the minor blues. The minor blues is gospel blues. That's that beautiful stuff that you hear with James Cleveland or Aretha Franklin, that sound. Charlie Parker was into straight up blues. And so when you find these classical musicians that are grounded in the foundation of the art form, they have the most beautiful sounds and they're the most creative. Dizzy Gillespie, a great musician, at first would not play the blues because, like a lot of us, they associated with slavery. Yeah, well, we didn't cause it. You're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, you know what I mean? But when he started listening to Bird and hearing all that blues, he realized he had made a mistake and he got back into the blues. So this was Coltrane. He was a product of his culture, but he was a product of his own gifts, his own strengths, and his own weaknesses. The second thing that I want to address here in looking at Coltrane is, why did it take him so long to develop to become a master? This is the second question. Most masters in our culture develop early, particularly in the art form. They developed early in their teenage years and their 20s. Sonny Rollins was a child prodigy. older musicians would come to his house when he was a child to share music with him, but to listen to him play. He was a child prodigy. Bird, Charlie Parker, he was gifted. As Dizzy Gillespie said, some of us have a lot of gifts. A lot of us have to work to really expand the gifts that we have. Charlie Parker had the first, but he also had his experience when he first performed. He was so bad that the drummer threw a cymbal at him, and it forced him to go into the country for the summer and to take some of the greatest musicians of his time and to slow the music down so he could hear how they played. And when he came back, he was so good that you had saxophone players throwing their saxophones into the river because they said, if this is how you play a saxophone, I'll never be able to do it. He was gifted. But Sandrea last week made the point. We come here with a light side and a dark side. His dark side was he was caught up in drugs. And while he had the gifts, he didn't have the discipline to overcome them. And so while he did great, juiced up, imagine the greatness he could have achieved unjuiced, and imagine how much longer he could have lived. So we come in with gifts. Some of them are great gifts at birth. Some of them are gifts that we have to develop. But either way it goes, it's a question, do we follow them? And for Coltrane, I want to say this. The real question was how we followed them because his gifts in the beginning were limited. So the big question is, what enabled Coltrane to get to this point where he could ascend to this highest level? I want to acquaint you with a couple of astrological things that I'm going to use. I'm not going to use many. I'm just going to use a few, because if you want to understand Coltrane, you need to understand some of these. Sandrea made the point about the universe is full of power. The energies of power, they're spirit powers. One of the ways in astrology we know the spirit powers inside a person are what we call elements, energies, fire, earth, air, and water. So every sign is one of those. Pisces is water, Aquarius is air, Sagittarius is fire, and so forth. These are the elements. Until recently, most astrologers had not known how to make anything of these elements. Most of these astrological books were kind of vague on that. But then you had a master come along who broke the code on that and explained how these elements work and how the mixtures work with a particular person. So in my case, I'm fire and earth. That's my basic mixture. What does that mean? Fire is creativity. Earth is practicality. It means a lot more. I'm being basic here so you understand it. What the fusion means is when you're able to fuse fire and earth is you're able to take creativity, bring it down to earth and make it walk, make it practical, okay? It also means fire and earth is people that have this combination. If they're on their roadway, they can last a long time. When other people have fallen by the wayside, they're still going and getting steam. You understand? It also means we can run over people, but not do it intentionally. But I'm a warrior, so running over to some extent is good. You know what I mean? So that's fire and earth. That's me. Me and my wife are fire and earth. In relationships, if your elements are similar, it's easier for you to vibe with the person. It's not necessary. So don't go throwing your mate out because they're water and air and you're fire and earth. Don't do that. You know, it'll work. Any mixture will work. But this is an ideal kind of situation. So what was Coltrane? Coltrane was complex mixture, but I'm going to deal with the main mixture. And that was water and air. This is real key to understanding Coltrane being able to negotiate his trials in life. We live in a world where air has been raised up, intellect, and intuition has been put in the garbage can and treated as a superstition. Coltrane lived in both realms. And in fact, the ideal for a human being is to be able to synthesize whatever your gifts are, synthesize it, work it together. So what did this mean for Coltrane? Coltrane lived in the realm of dreams. He was a dreamer. And when I say a dreamer, I mean dreams that were very accurate. So when we get into Coltrane and how he negotiated his rough spiritual expression in music, we're going to see how dreams played a role. So he got messages. I'm not going to go into which ones now, but those messages gave him direction and he followed them. And then the second thing was he was air, and he had 3 in each of these, air and water. And so air, intellectual. The key thing for him is he liked to play music from every angle. That was the main way he used air. And so he would play it this way, that way, and the other way. And one reason why his sessions were usually an hour and 45 minutes with one song, does that sound like anybody you know? Is because he was exploring the music from every angle. You know what I mean? Every angle. And then he'd find the best one. But then he's an improviser, innovator. He was always changing. So this is the first thing to understand is he synthesized intuition with reason. For him, there was no conflict with this. And in our culture, that's basic to African and African-American culture, most Eastern cultures, and it's basic to being a human being. And so most people have various qualities that mix. It's not just one, you know? The second thing about Coltrane to understand is this, and I'm not going to get in, it's but 2 things I'm going to get into that are technical, but these are things that are easy to understand. I'm not going to go into this house and what that was and all that. It would help if you understood astrology, but I'm not going to do that. The second thing about Coltrane is that he was born just when his sun sign moved into Libra, 0 degrees Libra. Had he been born 4 hours earlier, he'd have been 29 degrees Virgo, you know? But there's a reason why he was born 0 degrees Libra. We call that a cusp. That is a person born between 2 signs, basically going into Libra, but he has the influence of Virgo. This is very important because for John Coltrane, those Virgo qualities, which deals with detail, would be very important in how he achieved mastery in his own art form. So that is the 2 key things that I think you need to understand about Coltrane is that he had these 2 qualities. And these 2 qualities, both in the elements and in the fact that he was mixed. And by the way, you know, I want to say this thing about cusp people. They're complex. All people are. But people who are cusp people usually bridge 2 realities. Dr. Asa Hilliard, this great scholar that a lot of us know, and some of us don't, former dean at San Francisco State, endowed chair at Georgia State, spent his whole time on the road teaching people about African culture. I probably wouldn't be tenured, but for him being on my committee, he's a person that I never heard a person say a negative thing about, a really kind person. He was born on the cusp between Leo and Virgo. So what did that mean in his life? He was both, because he came from a family of educators. Almost everybody in his family had been an educator. But because he was born on the cusp, he was an educational psychologist. He mixed 2 realms. The brother that helped me with the 6-fold stages to mental freedom is also on the cusp, and he is both a Leo Virgo, and he is a master scholar, historian, and he is at the same time a chemist. He is at the same time a musician who plays piano, and he's a martial artist. That is the nature of cusp. And so in the case of Coltrane, the fact that he had this Libra thing, which is musical and rhythmic, and that's was his main gift. And then also it fits in with his overall drive for music, which he had a passion for. When you combine that with this Virgo's into detail. Virgo's, I'm married to a Virgo, 4 planets in Virgo. I didn't know what Virgo meant until I started in a relationship because the textbook didn't fit it. Virgos are very authoritative, by the way, you know what I mean? But they can get away with it because they use their mind. They can communicate. They go into detail and all this kind of stuff. Amilcar Cabral was a Virgo, this guy that you usually see on my side, a Virgo. Michael Jackson was, you know what I mean? All signs are great, by the way. There's no bad signs. By the way, let's get that straight. And any sign is good for almost anything. It depends on other things. So this is a key point. Sandrea was focusing on first, second, and third house. And those were the house of the person, the house of values, house of communication. And she was dealing with planet and signs for those to give you some ideas of how you can approach astrology. And all I'm going to say is Coltrane was dealing with different houses than that. In astrology, different houses rule different domains of life. And all I'll say is some of the ones that he dealt with had to deal with higher education. It had to deal with publishing. It had to deal with interest in philosophy, whether it's religion, whatever. Interest in history. It had to deal with musical theory, a whole bunch of stuff. And then his other realms was transformation. For him, a lot of his planets were in places that stress life, death, and rebirth. And those are real hard for some people to understand, but that is the path to divinity. It's dying in one state, being reborn in another. So this was also a part of Coltrane's pattern. And I want to say, one of the key things in Coltrane's life pattern was, and I have this, by the way, starting at the bottom. As a musician, he started at the bottom. Well, you can say everybody does, you know, because you're learning your instrument, but literally starting at the bottom and then growing up. And because also his musical skills were limited, it meant a lot of work at the bottom and then slowly rising. So this was also key to Coltrane. So when you look at Coltrane, he was a musician, but he did a lot of other things. He was constantly reading, and we'll go into just how many things he did in terms of the time he put in and everything else. So these are like key things to understand about Coltrane: the elements, water, and air, and the detail in terms of how he approached his music. Now in astrology is a symbolic system. So by studying the planets and studying the signs, and in this case, the elements, what we discover are the energies that they manifest. And so over time, you know, we find out that certain planets represent certain energies, certain signs represent certain energies. You think of astrology as only the sun. It's how all of these planets interact. And so here I'm only dealing with a few with Coltrane. So the key thing with Coltrane was that he had a lot of internal dissatisfaction. And this internal dissatisfaction had to do with the quality of his playing. And he was never satisfied with it. And this is the key thing to understand about his internal world. Now, because I'm going to back this up with facts, I have plenty of facts to prove it, because he would tell people how dissatisfied he was with his playing. He was so dissatisfied with his playing at one point, he threw out a whole body of music, threw it in the garbage can. That was because he wasn't satisfied with his music. Now, he was coming from a place with little skill. but he was working on his stuff. And he was harder on himself than he should have been. Now, if you're an astrologer, I could explain why. I could explain that certain planets set that up. But the key point is that he was too hard on himself, so hard that sometimes he didn't see the growth in himself. He didn't see that if his music wasn't all that great because he began to grow, then why was it that Dizzy Gillespie had him in as a young musician who had not yet ascended to the highest level? Dizzy saw things in him. And in fact, there was a time where my Coltrane was playing that Dizzy stopped playing and just listened to him. And when he finished, this is one of the greatest innovators on the trumpet. All he could say was, wow. That's all he could say was, wow. He could see he didn't have a lot of things together, but he saw the gifts. And Miss Yoakley saw them too, because she saw the promise in him where others would say, well, yeah, he couldn't play. But yeah, she saw promise. One of the big promises was, in the music, you imitate before you can improvise or innovate. When he imitated, he was never a full imitator. He never just sounded like somebody else. There was always, even when he was just learning the music, John Coltrane, there was always something special. And in the art form, that's the whole thing. Define your own voice. That's the big deal, because your voice is your destiny in music. That's your destiny. And so he was awful hard on himself, right? But here's the key thing about Coltrane. Why is it took him so long to, reach musical mastery? And how is it that he achieved musical greatness? He drew on that cusp thing, and particularly the detailed thing. Coltrane ascended from ordinary to extraordinary for a lot of reasons. The main one was because of his disciplined work ethic. This is my belief, and different people may have different beliefs on that, but I think the two most essential qualities in life is one, good character, and the other is discipline. And some people may have more smarts than others or more gifts than others, but if you take those two, those are the two essential ones. And what Coltrane had was a discipline, 14 hours a day of practice. And it was practice on techniques, particular techniques. It took him a long time to become a master because it took a long time to master particular techniques. And here's the deal with Coltrane. No other musician ever did this. Coltrane could play licks on the saxophone that no other saxophone player could play. Why? A lot of his musical style came from practice books, because Coltrane was always practicing on detail, and he would practice on trumpet licks that saxophone players couldn't possibly play. And so when he finally put all of his elements together, he could do things that nobody else could do. You hear me? But it was years of this, 14 hours a day, 14 hours of musical parts, of reading, of music theory, of all these things. And then, of course, he was human. His weight would go up and down. Sometimes he would take a sweet potato pie and eat the whole thing. And then a few weeks later, he's lifting weights. And that also had to do with why he had issues internally, because it would be issues where he'd expand and contract. That's astrology. I can't go into the details. But what I'd say is he was human. You know what I mean? So that was Coltrane. Now, here's the deal. And I'm going to wrap up here. So how did his water and air work? Coltrane had life trials. Musicians at his time, they were around bad circumstances, often performing in clubs owned by mobsters or around a lot of drugs. And Coltrane ended up becoming a drug addict and ended up becoming an alcoholic and continued to play. But there's a certain point where musicians came down on it. One musician said, "You're John Coltrane. Why are you acting like that? Coltrane was moved by the advice of others. He listened and he knew he was right. But then he reached a point where he couldn't play. And you see, with alcoholics, they usually, the only thing that will lead a lot of them to get off is the likelihood of death, the likelihood of losing somebody you value, like a wife, or losing the respect of children, or something like that. And again, because this is the realm of choice, you have to make the choice. So Coltrane reached a point in his life of crisis. He couldn't play. That's kind of like losing your job. I know people who have been alcoholics and lost their job. That is one thing that will get them to get off alcohol, or a doctor tells them one more drink and you're dead. Some will keep drinking, some will get off. Coltrane made the decision to cold turkey, discipline, finally. But it was only after Miles Davis had kicked him out of one of the best jazz groups ever, where Kind of Blue was, composed, and the best-selling jazz recording ever, and Coltrane was plaque up for that. And so he loses not only the gig, but he's losing respect. He cold turkeys. After 2 weeks, he frees himself from drug addiction and alcohol. His discipline. He didn't go to a detox center, which would be okay if he had, but he had the discipline to do it himself. And his wife, his first wife, Naima, supported him. And that was real key in his life, the love in his life that gave him support. 2 weeks later, now we get into the water. He sits up in his bed one morning, and Naima looks at him, and you could see a change had come over him. And she said, "John, what happened?" He said, "Naima, I heard the most beautiful sound of my life. It was a dream, a sound that comes from heaven." He called it a droning sound. It's an Indian sound. That sound is what drove him to become finally the improviser that he became, and then to create one of the most beautiful compositions in the history of music, period, A Love Supreme. A Love Supreme. And most people who say when they hear A Love Supreme, they feel like getting down on their knees. It was a worship to God, but it transcended any religion. And prior to that, he had been playing the tenor saxophone, the alto saxophone, which is the small saxophone that is usually played by amateurs. He didn't want to play it, but for some reason, that was the saxophone that he played during his early musical career. But then he had a dream, and that dream was from Charlie Parker. This was after Parker had passed. And Parker told him, give up the alto, go to the tenor. And the reason was Charlie Parker had done everything you could do on an alto saxophone. And there were a limited number of things you could do, but Charlie Parker had done just about everything. And he was giving him advice, not out of ego that I played it, you might play it better than me. No, from the heavenly realm, he could see what was best for John. And John listened to that. And so he went to the tenor and then later the soprano. And what did he say about the tenor saxophone? He said, when I got to the tenor saxophone, I was able to access all the great masters that had come before me. There were very few just on the alto. And so as he was developing his improvisational voice, which is bringing together many different sounds and coming up with your own, by listening to Bird and through a dream, changing saxophones, it put him in the position to become the improviser that he became and contribute to being an innovator. And an innovator is where you create 4 new schools of music. Now, John Coltrane moved from being not just average, but lacking much in terms of musical skill, except for rhythm and the passion for the music. But what he did, by drawing on his inner gifts, many of which involve trial and effort through hard work and through constantly playing among masters. And this is a real key thing to get straight. One of the things that enabled John's ascension was playing with Miles Davis. Another was playing with Thelonious Monk. And these two masters, because they were getting John way after Dizzy did, when he was really beginning to show his talent, they let him be himself. And so when he's playing with Miles, Miles plays staccato short, beautiful sounds. Miles had a sound that was magnificent. If you hear Miles, one beat, you know that's Miles Davis, you know? But Miles left a lot of space and Coltrane filled it up. Miles asked Coltrane once, why you play so long? And Coltrane said, that's the way I express myself. And Miles said, oh, and that gave him the freedom, but the freedom in the company of excellence. And then when he was apprenticing with Thelonious Monk, whereas he played with Miles, he would go to Monk's house and Monk would train without talking. He'd get on that piano because Monk had a sound. It was like almost a drum. It was a sound that was an off sound. No one could copy Monk. And he said, by watching Monk, it was like watching a builder. He was building a foundation. And he said, every detail mattered. Detail, you understand? So he was also apprenticing under masters and ascended to the highest level. So I'm ending by saying this. Astrology ain't the cure-all for everything. I mean, you know, there are things that you need to draw on other systems for. But for self-knowledge, it's the best system. For knowing the gifts that are within you, it's the best system. Had Coltrane not pursued his gifts with all those inner struggles, I could almost predict where he'd end up. Drugs and alcohol, maybe he'd get off of it. But a meaningless life in the sense that he was not pursuing his dreams. Those inner struggles would have been woe is me struggles. They would have been, why is life so hard? They would have been blame everybody else. But because Coltrane, using all that discipline, was pursuing his love, it was a discipline that is freedom. And in fact, in African-American culture, discipline is the precondition for freedom. Discipline is freedom. And once he got to that level, then he could break the rules. Coltrane played all kinds of music. Some people liked it, some people didn't. He was listening to his heart. And by the way, I said that he was in a house. Some of his signs were in a house where it was higher education and stuff. It was also contracts and law. It's a house that I have. John Coltrane reached one of the best musical contracts of any musician ever. Why? Well, first of all, Miles gave him his attorney. But secondly, Coltrane was grounded in that. And so every time you hear a song from John Coltrane, some money is going to the people who are his ancestors. Coltrane, once he ascended, he had no interest in music. Sandrea's point, don't pursue the dollar, pursue your gift. But when he pursued his gift, the most profound statement of love supreme he never thought would sell was one of the best-selling jazz recordings ever because it was his heart. It was his soul. That was Coltrane. You understand? A magnificent master. What does he tell you? It don't matter how much you got. Work on it and you can go higher. You hear me? Higher and higher. And I have a picture of him in my in our dining room, and it's a picture of Aretha Franklin and Coltrane, each coming out of the other's face, because that's showing the connection between the blues and jazz. And it's one of my favorite pictures, just to sit there because of his spirit. It wasn't just that he had all this great music. He was such a wonderful human being, such a great light, because he worked on himself. And you know, one of the great spiritual masters in the world said that what God gets out of our journey on earth, which is a free will thing, is what we come up with on our own, and especially what we come up with that is good. because God gives us the freedom to do that. And I'm sure God had a lot of smiles on its force, because it doesn't really have a face, on its force. And as the great Lakota holy man, Fool's Crow, says, God's a sucker for music, because music's vibratory. And God is vibratory force outside of space and outside of time. And Coltrane's wish, as a lot of our creative people's wish, was that his music would heal people. And he would actually, in his last years, he was working on the vibratory healing powers of music and was getting into African rhythms more. But that was his main thing, to bring love to humanity. And as he gained a greater appreciation of himself, he had a greater love for himself. So that's my point. My point is, know yourself, bring out your own gifts, and always use it to help other people. Sandrea, you got some stuff you want to add to this?
No, I think you've covered everything that you wanted to cover. I do know I definitely want to go and listen to A Love Supreme. And this is an incredible time for people to be listening to music that moves their soul, touches their heart. And Cinnabar, where are you? We should be on 2 screens now.
We are.
No, we're on, you're all in one. And now
Well, that's
I'm
how
all.
you see it, but I'm seeing both screens, and people are seeing both screens.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no other comments?
No other comments, no.
Okay. Okay, what we have here are a number of responses, and I'm going to see if there are any questions here. Robja, hello, beautiful people. Gladys Harris, songs still sounds good. She's probably referring to A Love Supreme. Adriana Paul, Know Thyself. Gladys Harris. Let's see. Gladys Harris, have you heard the sister Bobby Humphrey jazz? Thank you. Have you heard of Bobby Humphrey?
No.
No, neither have I. Tell us more about her, sister, Gladys Harris. Tell us more about her. Modesty, Savim, what books and gestures can we use to seek the favors of the universe? Sandrea?
There's a lot of wonderful books out now. I can't think of anything right off the bat. Let me just see. Hold on. Let me just look and see if there's.
Sandrea is looking for some books that are good. I would say Dr. Theophilo Benga's book on philosophy during the Pharaonic period. That's good because it's a survey of African deep thought. There's a historian, his name is Morenz, M-O-R-E-N-Z, African Religion. He does a good job of showing how Kemetic systems are spirit-based. Try to think of some things that are really good.
Okay, for astrology, I think anything by Arroyo.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Liz Green. And I know there's a lot of probably really wonderful ones, newer ones that are out, but I'm not familiar with them. But I think Arroyo would be the person that I would.
Yeah, astrology and elements.
Yes.
That's his masterwork. He's a counselor and an astrologer, and he's the one that broke the code on how elements mix and work. It's really good, you know, would help you, especially if you get your chart done, you know what your elements are, then you can see which ones are primary. And you could better, you're going to see it in your behavior, but it'll give you a real clue, you know. Let's see. Adrian Paul, she made this comment when you were first speaking, Sandria. We need to be gut level honest with ourselves. So I would pose a question to you. In addition to what you already said, what are some of the things you would suggest in terms of gut level internal honesty?
I mean, really, it's just what I said. I mean, really being honest with ourselves. Because, I mean, it's just so easy. The egoic, it's so easy for us to fool ourselves. And the truth is to know that all of us are subjected to major programming. This is a big programming zone. Most people are not even really using their own mind, and they don't even know it. So one of the great things that I would recommend, I strongly recommend, of course, me being a Pisces, is the power of prayer and ask and ye shall receive. And to really ask that programs be taken out. And there are different ways of going in, and you can use shamanic ways or just using your intention, but really asking to be restored back to our own mind. And I don't know what else I can say, because I mean what I say. We just have to be really honest with ourselves, and that's not always easy to be. We like to have pictures. We like to protect ourselves, and you know, yeah.
Okay, Gladys Harris, how do I connect Sagittarius's goodwill spirit? And then she also asked, I mean, how can I connect the sign which will allow me to grow more spiritually or spiritual?
So I guess she's saying that maybe she has a Sagittarian sun.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way I like to connect, as I say, is through the tarot. And the sign for Sagittarius is really the alchemist sign, ultimately. And it's really, okay, what I would say is this. For Sagittarius, you really need to be clear what your ideology is. Your ideology is going to make, I mean, in all of our lives, how we perceive a thing, it makes a difference as to how that thing is going to show up in our lives. And so I would say with being Sagittarius, be really clear what your worldview is, your view of life, and really work with that.
Yeah, that's important, because Sagittariuses are drawn to philosophy and various systems. And one of the things I would say is that with Sagittarius, with the Western influence, it's too much doctrine in it. And in the older systems, it's much more the spirit and drawing on the inner spirit or spiritual powers, the things that Sandria was talking about, which are, you know, key. And it takes you out of the dogmatic zone, you know.
Yeah, and it's also Jupiter. And in the mystery school that I was in, there's an axiom that is aligned with Jupiter. And it's, just one second, let me get it. Because the mind is having a hard time functioning today. um, from the exhaustless riches of the limitless substance, I draw all things needful, both spiritual and material. So you just meditate on that alone can start helping you to shift into the deeper, more mystical side of Sagittarius. From the exhaustless riches of limitless substance, I draw all things needful, both spiritual and material.
Hmm. This same lady asked a question, and this one here has got some implied stuff in it. So let's see how you handle this one. So can some people be more down to earth?
I would say absolutely yes. You know, that's their nature is I don't have any earth signs. So yes, there are some people that can be way more down to earth than others. Yeah.
Now, Gladys, you may not know that there's a bias in there in your question because you're assuming that if someone is not down to earth, then there's something that needs to bring them down. Well, my sister just said she doesn't have any earth. I don't have any air. See, depends on how your mixtures, those elements, fire, earth, air, and water work. Some people have all of them. Coltrane did, but he had two primary concentrations, water and air. But a lot of people don't have all of them. So if they don't, I think that it might not be realistic to be expecting somebody to be what they aren't. And it's good for them to be the way they are. You know what I mean? Down to earth, that's good if that's what you got. Up in the air, that's good if that's what you got. And by the way, I have a friend, I'm not going to name his name. He don't watch the show anyway, but if he did, I'm not going to give his name. He's water, he's air and earth. I did his chart years ago. He's a wonderful person. But what does that mean? He has earth. This guy's a heck of a good businessman. I won't go into why, there's a bunch of reasons. And he's a very smart, good with science, good with a whole lot of things. But he's air and earth. What happens because these two elements, you know, they work, but it's a little harder to work. You can end up in the air and never get down to earth. And this happens with him sometimes. And I've seen this with a lot of people. And that means that sometimes staying up in the air, sometimes you'll end up dealing with some stuff that doesn't work down here on earth. But then when he gets down to earth, he's very good. He makes a lot of money and he's into helping people. So he's not your typical money for money's sake. He helps people a lot. So here's a case where somebody has got earth, but sometimes it's flying too high sometimes. So it all depends on your nature, how you work with it. But because you don't have something, doesn't mean you have to get it. You need to know that's something you don't have. Know that that's a blind spot for you. I know I don't have air. So I know there's things I have to do. So you'll follow what I say. Otherwise, I'd be all over the place because I don't have any air. I know that. But to ask me to be airy ain't going to work. I ain't got no air. I know. But I have ways for compensating for it. You know what I mean? So understand you don't know it, but there's a little bias in your question, and it's okay. Because you probably know some people, you like to be more realistic in some stuff. I get it. It's okay. That also means you're a Sagittarius that's probably got earth in you. That's probably what's happening there. I'll bet you. I'll bet you. You know what I mean? Let's see if there's any other stuff here. Go down and see if we got any others. Okay, this is James P.A.P.O. Can you say anything about elements and Ben Buchanan's African diagram of opposites? He's talking about, I think, Dr. Joseph Ben Buchanan's diagram of opposites, or Coltrane's circle of fifths mediation on general relativity. He's talking about Coltrane dealing theory of relativity. But his main question is, can you say anything? I think you would say more about elements, fire, earth, air, and water. You got more you want
That's
to
to
say?
you, Shaka.
Huh?
That's on you. On you.
Oh, okay. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in astrology, those elements are real important. And Sandrea recommended the book you should read, the person that broke the code on that, Stephen Arroyo. And so your elements will be of different mixtures. And so some will have a fire air mixture, some will have an earth water mixture. Some, they'll have different elements. And Coltrane was more complex than I portrayed, but I dealt with his primary thing, which was water and air. But he also had earth and fire, but it was only 2 planets in each one of those concentrations. And the earth fire thing's good for long term. Coltrane died at 40. So he probably didn't need that long term stuff. I don't know if it was destined for him to die at that time or maybe not. I don't know. So the mixtures vary according to what signs you have, what planets are in what signs. And so let's say it's fire and air, then it's creativity and intellect, those 2 coming together. You know what I mean? So it depends on the mixture, or air, water, and earth, intuition and practicality. And so it's a question of how people handle those. And the real key point I want to make, I was trying to make in the beginning of my presentation, and Sandrea's made very clearly, you really only pipe into this stuff really at their deep level when you're following your wish, when you're following your direction. You can get it anywhere, but the main way is when you're piping into your purpose. And then that's when these things really start to work and really start to flower. And oftentimes when you're not on your path and you're just on whatever it is to survive, or, you want all this money, but it's not what makes you happy. If you're on those paths, then a lot of these mixtures and a lot of things we haven't talked about in astrology, you be tuned out of it. You're not going to be using it, or you'll be using it on a low level. And so it really works best when you're trying to get on your own frequency, do your own thing. So these elements work. I think that's all. Let me go back up and see if there's anything back up here. No, that sounds like it's it, Sandrea. So you
All
have
right.
anything else you want to close on? Oh, I was supposed to make an announcement. My sister's emerging out of 15 years of a hiatus, and she's in need of assistance. If you resonate with her and have computer, MailChimp, or WordPress skills, here's an opportunity for an exchange of services. If you feel called to do this, contact her at Sondrea, Sondraya.com, Sondrea.com. And you can work out a barter here. And I'm sure that there's some stuff that Sondrea could offer you that would be useful for you. So check that out. Any closing remarks, Sondrea?
Yeah, my closing remarks are this, that we have everything that we need inside of us. And all we need to do is ask, and we shall receive. And yes, I know I'm making it sound really simple, and it is simple, but it's also hard. Staying in strict integrity with our own selves, staying honest with ourselves, and forgiving ourselves, forgiving, loving. I believe that love is the answer. And like I say, love has protected me. Love is better than a gun. And I think I'd like to just share one story, just to illustrate the power of our words. There was a time when I had talked my partner into God is my insurance for car insurance. And then I got caught speeding. And I got caught speeding by Sedona redneck cop that did not like me at all, or this big dolphin van that I was driving. And he was talking to me so derogatory. No cop had ever talked to me so bad as he did. But all I'm thinking of is it was $1,000 to get caught without insurance. So in my mind, I screamed, I yelled, God, there's no punishment in thee. I deserve to be set free. And then I turned around and I lasered the guy. I'm talking to him like he's my best friend, like he isn't talking to me the way he's talking. I just zoomed in on it. And I continued to look for what I didn't have, of course. I never said I didn't have insurance. I just kept looking for it. So finally, I give him the registration. He snatches it out of my hand. He goes to his cop car. And when he comes out, he's a different person. The first word out of his mouth is ma'am. He says, ma'am, I'm on the force for 20 years and I've never done this before and I don't know why I'm doing it now. And he shoved a warning into my hand. And that's when I realized that asking ye shall receive. That's when I realized it's up to me to educe the goodness, the Christ, the goodness out of someone else. And that's when I saw that I am not a victim. It's up to me. If I had a chose to engage with him and, you can't talk to me like that. What's your badge number? Any of that stuff. It was going to cost me $1,000 plus that speeding ticket, what he had caught me for. So I just wanted to share that as an example. That's something that no matter what comes up in our life, we are not alone. We can call on a power way beyond ourselves. And we can live a much more magical life. I want to tell you though, since that time, that happened in the 1980s, right? Since that time, all across the United States, back and forth, I have been stopped now 24 times. Do you know not one cop has the heart to give me a ticket? And I believe it's because I had, just before I had met the Sedona redneck cop, I had done some deep prayer work and I was tired of my own prejudices. And I asked God to take away all my prejudices. And then I stood at the ocean as the waves are coming and pulling out and pulling out. And I didn't realize until I met up with him that my biggest prejudice had been cops. I couldn't stand how they had treated us, growing up and the whole thing. And then I realized that I must have really meant it. That's what I mean about being really on your case, because I could have asked for it, but not really meant it, because I still want to hold out and, they don't deserve my love kind of thing. But that's how I knew I really meant it once I met him. And so, and the voice keeps coming. In fact, I keep thinking every time it happens that, oh, this is the time I'm going to get the whammy. The voice says, no, you earned it. So that's my story.
So what Andrea is telling you is 23 times she was speeding. Well,
my foot just isn't legal. We just disagree. We disagree about what's safe.
She ain't up here saying I didn't do it. She's saying that the power of her thought created another reality, and it was a genuine, sincere thought, and that is real. The reality is you are your thoughts. You hear me?
Yep.
You are your thoughts.
And I set myself free. Some people think, oh, I deserved it. I was speeding, so I should get it. No, there's no punishment. I deserve to be set free just because I didn't follow a stupid little law. I mean, I didn't run over anybody. I didn't hurt anyone.
Right on. You sure do. Given all the wrong that's done, measly speeding ticket or not having some insurance, that's minor. You know what I mean? You should be let off just because of all the other things that happen. You are entitled to that. You know what I mean? Especially if that's what you think.
That's what I believe. And
Uh-huh.
so it really doesn't matter whether our beliefs are true or false. Whatever we're focusing on, that's what grows.
Mhm. That's true.
That's what grows. And I knew if because my thoughts started thinking, oh crap, blah 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 blah. And I knew if I kept thinking like that, I was going to get a ticket. That's when I released myself. I deserve to be set free.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I just conclude on saying one thing that, and this is, I know, true for Sandrea. In life, follow the truth. And the most important truth is your inner truth, you know, that truth that guides you. That's your passion, that's your gift. But to follow God or to follow the divinity is to follow the truths that lie within you. But the ultimate truth is that thing that you dream about, that thing that you really want more than anything else. And very rarely is it a material thing. It's the things that are your gifts, the things that give you the most joy in expressing. That is the thing. And I've said before, I'll repeat this. There are two types of people when it comes to the destiny road: those that know it and those that find out. I'm in the second category. I didn't know. I just followed what seemed to be right and true. And then I ended up in these positions. That was me. But other people, they know. And either way, follow what is the joy inside of you. Follow that. And that is heaven. That's happiness. That's where love is in its deepest level. Coltrane's a love supreme. That is a love supreme. You know, be yourself. Don't let anybody take you off the track. Don't let your lover tell you that you shouldn't do this because it pleases him. That's why I always tell my wife, I said, I don't really care. I don't mean I don't care what people think about me. If someone's making a judgment that's going against what I know is true for me, I don't care. You know what I mean? That's my view. But a lot of people are living in the wishes of other people. They're making other people happy, but they're not making themselves happy. And that's how a lot of people get detoured off on another path. And the money one is the big one that Sandrea has already addressed. So follow your heart. And it doesn't mean it's just a job. It is whatever your calling is to help other people. And that's where these higher powers really work. Sandrea, I'm really proud to have you as my sister. Wise lady, strong lady, lovely lady. Huh?
Thank you,
Right
Shaka.
on, sister.
I'm really glad to be your sister.
Yeah, well,
Thank you.
it's mutual. And we're fortunate to have the parents we had
Yeah,
and the kin we had. Great kin.
yeah.
So for everybody, next week, this will be part 3. So Hotep to you.